Welcome to Clocking In, Voices of NC Manufacturing. I'm your host, Phil Mintz, Director of the North Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership, otherwise known as NCMEP. My role is to drive outreach to NC manufacturers, build relationships to federal and state leaders, and coordinate efforts to drive profitable manufacturing growth in North Carolina. Throughout my time working closely with manufacturers, I have heard the most quirky, curious, and memorable stories. I wanted to turn these stories into a podcast so that others may hear and be informed and inspired. From humble beginnings to manufacturing titans, from tragedy to triumph, I will be interviewing some of these manufacturers who have made North Carolina manufacturing the powerhouse that it is today. Mass timber is a type of engineered wood product that's gaining popularity in the construction industry due to its sustainability, strength, and versatility. Unlike traditional lumber, which is typically cut from large trees, mass timber is made by laminating smaller wood pieces together to create large panels or beams. These panels can be used as structural elements in buildings, offering a renewable alternative to concrete and steel. Based in West Jefferson, North Carolina, Carolina Timberworks, a pioneer in the timber frame industry, stands out as a sustainability leader for its unique approach. As a designer and manufacturer of custom timber frame structures, they have crafted homes, barns, outbuildings, party barns, and commercial structures like offices, churches, and outdoor market spaces. They have a rich 21-year history and over 350 projects completed nationwide and beyond. I'm sitting down today with Eric Morley, founder of Carolina Timberworks. Eric graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and earned his MBA from Appalachian State University. Eric is a lifetime Timber Framer Guild member, served on the Timber Framers Guild Board of Directors as Vice President, has served on the Timber Frame Business Council Board of Directors, is a licensed general contractor, and teaches an AIA continuing education course on timber framing. So, Eric, there's a lot in there. So, how are you doing this morning?
I am well. I hope you are, Phil.
Yeah. So, it sounds like you know a whole lot about the timber frame business.
Well, I don't know about that, but
yeah. But can you tell me about that type of business and what is a timber frame building? How does that develop?
Okay. So, timber framing is a 4,000-year-old building technology. And it was developed to connect big pieces of wood, right? And we didn't have screws, we didn't have metal plates, and we didn't have bolts or nuts. So I had to figure out some way to fasten two pieces of wood together, all right? And at the core of it, it's a mortise and tenon joint with a wooden peg holding it together. So there's no metal, no screws, and the two pieces interlock, and a peg holds it in place. It died out. Timber framing completely died out because we invented nails, we invented railroads, we invented sawmills, and balloon frame construction, which we all know as 2x4 and 2x6 conventional construction. And in the 70s, a group of men and women, and they don't mind being called hippies, by the way, okay, got really interested up in the Northeast looking at the old buildings, particularly the barns. And, as they thought, this is a really cool way to build. Why can't we build like this anymore? Why don't we build like this anymore? So that started a renaissance of timber framing, which continues to grow to this day. It's a tiny niche in the building market. It's more expensive initially than conventional construction. But if you could picture this room, we don't see what's holding up the ceiling above us. We just see sheetrock, right? And in a timber frame, the skeleton, those big posts and beams, are visible inside the room. So the envelope, the building insulation, goes on the outside of the timber frame. It's a wonderful surprise to walk into a timber frame building, because from the outside it could be anything. It could be brick, could be wood-sided, whatever. And you walk inside, and all of a sudden you see the structure expressed, and it's like living in art. Timber framing is one type of mass timber. So timber framing was actually the original mass timber, right? So we built all the industrial mills in North Carolina were built with heavy timber, solid timber. And mass timber encompasses solid timber, right? But also the laminated CLT, which is cross-laminated timber, which is plywood on steroids, about that thick. And then glue-lam, which is when you make a beam by laminating smaller pieces together. So those three things make up mass timber. Now, I wanted to clarify that just a little bit.
So do you live in a timber frame?
That's a really good question. We do. My wife and I,
right.
Yeah, we do. And I keep building little timber frames around our house, and we're just finishing up her 2-stall barn.
Is that a party barn?
No, little horse barn.
What's a party barn?
It's kind of a catch-all term, and I was thinking the other day, I think it's kind of like a multi-use building. So someone would build
like a man cave.
Yeah, but bigger, or a woman cave, too. Everything mixed in, and a toy cave. All right. So if you imagine a great big space, this beautiful timber frame barn, and it may have a bathroom, might even have a kitchen. Okay, so, but you'd also store your toys in it, your tractor, your skid steer, your whatever could be stored in that building, and then you could move them out, okay, and have your daughter's wedding in it, and your parties and so forth. You could also put your antique car collection in it, so lots and lots of uses for those buildings.
So how are these types of buildings advancing? I mean, can you do multi-levels, or what's the advancement in timber frame building?
You can do. They're actually building wooden skyscrapers now. Okay.
Wow.
So, and you did a great introduction there about mass timber, and we're seeing a lot of interest in mass timber because of its sustainability. Just wood is, it's the only renewable building resource we have. All right. Steel, concrete are not renewable. So you can build commercial, multi-level structures. We do mostly residential, but we've also done some commercial. We did Google's facility in Charlotte. But a typical project would be, a 1 or 2 story house. And we do a lot of what we call a hybrid timber frame, where it's not fully timber framed, but it's a mix of conventional construction and timber framing. So if, say it was your house, Phil, we maybe the front entryway would be timber framed to give you a suggestion of what you're about to see inside. You'd walk through that. You might walk into then a 2-story great room that was timber frame with your kitchen off to the side, and then possibly a timber frame porch on the other side. But then maybe the wings of the house would be conventionally framed 2x6 construction to keep the cost down.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing. So, is this a kind of a growing niche in the States, or is it an international focus on that?
I would say it's enjoying a revival internationally. Been in the news a lot. You may have seen the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris burned down. That roof was timber framed.
Oh, wow.
And so, it sounds bad to say this, but it couldn't have happened to a better country, all right? Because France has an amazing program, the Compagnon, formal training for timber framers. And so they had all the people there. We in the U.S. reached out and said, we'd like to help with this. And the French, I lived in France, so I can say this, but the French were kind of like, well, we don't need your help, But actually, a few timber framers from the U.S. did go and helped to rebuild that roof on schedule, by the way, which was amazing.
So talk about, again, just the whole timber framing process and building these things. So is it like a conventional construction? I mean, who does that? How do you get trained on how to build a timber frame?
Well, we basically don't have formal training in the U.S. We're all self-taught, and there is a guild, the Timber Framers Guild, and amazing group of people who share knowledge. And I remember going to the first conference I ever went to, a guild conference, and just sitting there, just being struck, why is this, quote, competitor telling this? I can't believe they're giving away their secrets. And, it's an industry. I've never, ever been involved with an industry where it was better people who really help each other. I mean, we did a project one time in Central Park. and we miscut. And you can imagine a project in Central Park. I mean, the street's blocked off. There's a crane there at $1,000 an hour. It was a big deal, and we miscut a timber. So and we're in North Carolina, all right? So I got on the phone, looked who's the closest timber frame company, called them, told them the story. They had a timber there the next day for us. It's an amazing industry.
So do you have that countrywide? Does every state have this? I mean, how big is it?
No, it's funny. It's initially it's a low barrier to entry, right? I mean, you learn how to do it, okay? And what do you need? You need a really nice big chisel. You need a 16-inch circular saw and some tools and a pickup truck, and you can be a timber framer. So what happens is companies kind of spawn timber frames. So Asheville has, there were a couple of bigger ones who spawned smaller people. Franklin, North Carolina is the same way. Boone's the same way. West Jefferson's the same way. But you do tend to see it, for some reason, a lot up in New England, a bunch of good timber frame companies up there. Not so much in the middle of the country, some, and then the West Coast, and then we're seeing a lot in our area of the world. The Appalachian Mountains are a destination for people retiring and building second homes and so forth. And, it fits, okay, and there's a tailwind that's helping us there. People moving to the area if they want, it fits. But the funny thing about timber framing is it can be rustic, all right, and it can also be very, very contemporary.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, is it generational? I mean, are the younger families, interested, and do you see any growth there?
We do, and the younger people seem to prefer the contemporary look, okay, which is I would call clean. You're wanting to see less knots in the timber. You're wanting to see less checking, which is splitting as the timber dries. The surface would be smooth and sanded, so clean design. Whereas I think some of the older generation, my generation, prefers, and I'm not saying I do, but more traditional, where it might be a little bit more elaborate.
Speaking with Eric Morley, the founder of Carolina Timberworks, located in West Jefferson, is most of your building in the states around that area? Or are you all over the state?
Actually, most of our business is in North Carolina and the surrounding states. But it's an interesting business in the sense that the biggest job we ever did was in Nebraska, all right? And you go, well, how does that work? Well, if we're going to build in Florida, let's say, okay, and a traditional house, well, eventually the crew would show up at your home and they'd concrete the trucks and the framers and everything else to start building. Well, we build timber frames in a factory. We don't build them on site. We can, but they're not as it's not as efficient. It's not as safe, and the final quality is not as good. So it's interesting that for this small part of the building industry, it is on the higher end of the building industry. We actually build these in a factory.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't make sense the way we build houses in America today. It really doesn't. If we built cars that way, 3 guys would show up in your driveway, and 4 years later, okay, and $500,000 later, your car would be ready. They show up, it rains, they go home. Okay, they don't have 5/8 by 6-inch bolts, so they leave, and you're paying them to go to Lowe's and buy that bolt. It makes so much more sense to build it in a factory, heated. Okay, all of our equipment's there, the forklifts, everything else.
But that's just not what we're used to seeing.
No, but it's so funny in our country how we look down on modular or factory-built homes. We're wrong. We're absolutely wrong. It's not the right way to build. So it's just so strange. Here's this little niche industry, right, serving high-end clientele, and we're building them in a factory.
That's why you're a manufacturer, I guess. Exactly. Because we call regular people who build the homes, they're construction people. You don't see them as manufacturing companies. Right. Wow, it's very interesting.
May I go back to your question though, just to be sure that I was clear why? Because of that, we pre-build the timber frame. We design it, we engineer it, and we fabricate it in our shop. We cut every piece, we label every piece, okay, and then we put it on a truck. And we can ship it anywhere in the country send our guys there and put it up very fast, like a week or 2 weeks.
And you have everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're right. It sounds more efficient, but it's different.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah. And then if I could, I just wanted to talk about sustainability. What is sustainability? And my sister-in-law, Charlotte, has the best definition I've ever heard. And she said, well, it's just not using it all up. And I was like, that makes so much sense, right? And, timber framing is sustainable. So let's back up. Wood is the only renewable building material we have. Maybe straw, but even up in West Jefferson, we can't get straw bale houses built, right? So it's really the only renewable building material we have. But is it sustainable? Well, maybe not. Okay, so if we take a big forest and we cut it up into 2x4s and we make paper out of it and paper towels, and we use a paper towel, so that tree in that forest absorbed carbon for its whole life, right? And encapsulated it in wood, right? And that wood is a carbon sink. But if we make paper towels out of it and throw it in the landfill, the paper towel decomposes and the CO2 goes right back up in the atmosphere. If we build a house out of 2x4s, right? Well, the wood is acting as a carbon sink. But if we tear that house down in 30 years and those 2x4s go and the OSB goes to the landfill, all that CO2 goes right back up in the atmosphere. So that may not be the most sustainable way to build, right? And I think, and a lot of other people in the industry think, timber framing is the most sustainable way of using wood, all right? Furniture would be another one. Okay, if your grandparents ever gave you a clock, and a wood clock, grandmother clock, if you keep wood dry, it lasts indefinitely, thousands of years, right? So you build a piece of furniture, you keep it in a family, thousands of years, that wood is acting like a carbon sink. That carbon is never going back up into the atmosphere. So a timber frame building, and some of them exist in Japan that are 2,000 years old. Okay, go up in New England and look in an old church or many of those old buildings, they're timber framed. The roof is timber framed. So a timber frame, the day it is done, first of all, they last hundreds of years if they're kept dry. But the day the building reaches the end of its life, they're not going to take those big, beautiful beams and throw them in the landfill. They're going to reuse them. All right. So it continues to be a carbon sink, right?
So timber frame structures are reusable.
Yes, exactly. Whereas a 2x4 or 2x6 is probably going in the landfill. It's full of old nails and everything else. So, and there's one more thing that ties in with this. What I just said makes a lot of sense, but at some point the house comes down. So there's another thing that comes into this, and it's design. All right, a house or a building that is designed so well that people love it, okay, will be maintained. The roof will be fixed, the siding, the leaks will be fixed, and because it's maintained, it will last years and centuries. And you can look around in Durham at some of these buildings, that I was admiring today. They have been, and so design factors in it. So beautiful homes that people love, are sustainable too, because they're not going to be torn down in 30 years.
So, does the regular construction industry, do they embrace this? As you're marketing these types of homes, and is there any kind of, what do the other types of home builders say about it?
I don't think they know what it is, really. Probably 98% of home builders have no clue. The other 2% might know something about it and probably would like to. They probably think it's pretty interesting.
How do you see your business, growing? You founded this business, and so you have family involved. Is it going to be generational? Do you think that it'll keep going? Our
family, my wife Gesh and I, our children are not interested. They're scattered around the country. I really hope the business does succeed and carry on. And to me, that's part of being sustainable, is a sustainable business model where the owners reinvested profit in the business, didn't pull all the profits out. And, at a core level, the business has to be profitable or it can't be sustainable, right? So
Right.
I hope it goes on. I don't know. I'm 61 and just beginning to figure out, well, what, they're going to, I'm going to leave that building one way or the other. Is it on a stretcher or on my feet? So,
Well, kids never say they want to do the family business, but sometimes they still do it anyway.
Well, hope springs eternal.
Yeah. Again, this is fascinating. And again, I appreciate your time.
We appreciate very much the opportunity and the fine work you all are doing.
Thank you for joining today's Clocking In, Voices of NC Manufacturing. This podcast is brought to you by NC State's College of Engineering, the North Carolina Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and Industry Expansion Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about the solutions NCMEP offers, go to www.ncmep.org. Want to listen to previous Clocking In podcasts? Go to ncmep.org/clockingin.